Okay. In the last class, okay, we have discussed about XPath. So different types of XPath we have. So we have absolute XPath and relative XPath. The absolute XPath start with a single slash, and from the parent node HTML until the element we have to navigate using single slash only. Okay. Now about relative XPath. Relative XPath starts with a double slash, where we can directly target on the element, where we can identify, or else nearby element. Okay. So when we're using double slash, what is the advantage? We can directly identify the element without using navigating to each and every element. So if you're navigating to each and every element, like if you're using absolute XPath, the disadvantage that we have is if any element got changed in between or got removed by the developer, so that XPath won't work. So we cannot identify the or target element. Okay, so it's preferred to use relative XPath. So we have discussed total 7 types of locators as of now. So one is ID, name, class name, tag name, link text, partial link text, and XPath. So the last we are going to discuss about CSS selectors. Okay, again like XPath, we have different types of CSS selectors that are there. So we need to discuss each and every type of CSS selectors. Okay, so what is CSS? CSS is nothing but cascading style sheet. CSS is nothing but cascading style sheet. I'm just giving a name here. I wanted to know, but I'm just giving. CSS, cascading style sheet. Nothing but the CSS selectors. Again, there are different types of CSS selectors are there that we're going to discuss today. So let me open the sample website. So this is a sample website I've opened. I want to inspect this element where I want to write some CSS selector. Okay, let me inspect on this. Okay. Okay. I'm going to inspect this particular search box. I got this particular element. So where we have a ID, class, type, different attributes we have. Now I want to identify element using ID. We have directly ID is there. That is fine. But using CSS selector, using ID, I want to write a CSS selector. I want to write some CSS selector here. So how to write using ID, how to identify this element using CSS selector? I want to make use of ID attribute and I want to write some CSS selector. So if you want to identify using ID, right? Normally XPath, how we are writing? Double slash input, square brackets open and close. In between the square brackets @ID is equal to single quotes, the corresponding ID value. This is how you wrote, right? @attribute name is equal to in the single quotes attribute value, and here is a double slash tag name. This is how you wrote XPath. Now how to identify using ID attribute, how to write a CSS selector, right? Now what we have to do is for IDs, we have to start with the hash symbol for only IDs. Hash symbol, which is nothing but it represents the ID. No need to mention @ID, something like this. If you put hash symbol, which is nothing but ID. And what is the value of ID? Set square it off. Just copy this and put like this. That's it. This is a CSS selector. Hash represents the ID and the corresponding value. This is the CSS selector. Using this CSS selector, we are identifying this particular complete web element. Okay, complete web element is getting highlighted here. Okay. This is a CSS selector if you want to make use of ID. Hash and then ID value. That's it. Using ID, we wrote a CSS selector. Now I'm going to use this ID, the CSS selector, and I want to enter some text inside this text box. So let us see. Let me create a new class. Okay, right click on locators, new class, CSS selectors, and then example, public static void domain. I'm going to copy the existing code to open the website. Okay. And then here I'm going to identify the element using CSS selector. Now driver dot find element by dot CSS selector. Inside the CSS selector, we need to pass the corresponding CSS selector that you have written. And then send keys. I want to enter some text here inside the text box. Let's say I want to enter some blue shirt, something like this. Okay, now let me run this. Opening the website, launching the URL, maximizing the window, and then finding the element using CSS selector with the help of ID. And then we're trying to enter some text. Okay, we're able to enter the text. So this is how we need to identify an element using CSS selector, by.css selector, and you need to pass the corresponding CSS selector. Inside, there are different other ways that we can write a CSS selector. We will see one by one. This is one way. Using ID, we can write a CSS selector like this, hash, and then corresponding value. Just a second, guys. Okay. So now we'll see different other types of CSS selectors. Using ID, we have identified like this. Okay. Okay. Now, I want to identify using class name. I want to write a CSS selector. Now using class name. For ID, we need to put a hash symbol, and then we have to put the corresponding ID value. Correct? Now, what about class name? Okay. Now let us open the same website and see. Let me remove this. So we have a class, and inside the class we have multiple classes separated by space. Correct? So this is one class name, and this is another class name, another class name. So let us take this particular class name. Using this particular first class name, I want to identify element. I want to write a CSS selector. How to write using class? So copy the class. Previously we kept hash symbol for ID. Now we have to put dot and copy the corresponding class value. Multiple classes will be there. Whichever you find it unique, copy that class file, class name, and then put dot search underscore that particular class name you provide. Dot. We have to provide dot here instead of hash symbol. So this is how we have to identify an element using CSS selector with the help of class name. For class, you need to put dot. For IDs, you need to put hash. Okay. So let me copy this and try to perform some action. Okay. Now I'm using the CSS selector only, but I'm trying to identify using the class name. I have wrote a CSS selector. This is how you have to write a CSS selector with the help of class name dot class value. Run this. See, now we are able to perform action, right? So that's about the class name. Now discussed about class name. This is a syntax dot class value like dot logo, something like this. And if you want to identify ID, you have to use like this hash set query top, something like this. Okay, this is the syntax, and this is the example that I have given. And now I have to use. I want to use both tag name and ID. I want to use both. Okay, tag name along with the tag name, along with using ID, I want to write a CSS selector. So how to write this? So now how to identify using ID? Hash and then corresponding ID value. Correct? This is how I'm going to identify an element using CSS selector. If I want to use tag also, what is the tag name here? Input. The starting you have to put input. That's it. Input, which contains ID. Hash is nothing but ID, represents the ID. Search query top. Identify that particular element. This is how we need to write. Okay. Tag name and then corresponding ID, ID value, hash ID value. That's it. If you want, you can try it out. Okay, the same website, the same concept, you can try it out. Now, I want to use tag name and class name. What to write? Tag name and class name. With the help of tag name and class name, I want to identify the element. How to write now? Input dot class value. Correct. So now I'm using ID, input hash and all. Now I want to use along with the tag name and the class name. So input dot and the class value. Here the class is set underscore query. First write a dot set underscore query, which is class name, and starting you put the tag name. That's it. So this is how along with the okay, I'm able to identify the corresponding element. It got highlighted. This is how we need to identify with the help of both tag name and class name. Okay. Now let's say there is no ID, then there is no class. If you want to use any other attribute apart from ID and class, if there is ID and class, you just normally write hash ID hash and then tag name dot class name tag name hash ID value. You are writing like this. There is no ID or class name. If you want to use any other attribute, okay. So how you are going to write CSS selector for that? Okay. So if I'm going to use any other attribute, let me inspect. Okay, now I want to use name. I won't want to use ID. I don't want to use class. So I want to use in tag along with the name. How to write? Normally, how we are writing XPath / input hash @ name is equal to, because ID we are using trying to use name. All right. So name is equal to the corresponding name value in the single quotes and then brackets close. This is how we are going to identify with the help of name. You have written an XPath, relative XPath. Now I have to write the same thing with the help of CSS selector. If you have ID, we are putting input hash ID value, input dot class value. But if apart from ID and class value, if you want to use any other attribute, how to write CSS selector? Now let us see. First write the input. Okay, don't put double slash, just input. Till now I didn't use any double slash, right? This is a CSS selector. Don't put double slash. And then square brackets open and close. Don't put @. Okay, name is equal to, in the single quotes, copy the corresponding attribute value. That's it. This is a CSS selector, not an XPath. Okay. Don't put double slash, don't put @. That's it. This is a CSS selector. Now I will copy this and I will try to perform some action. We'll see whether it works or not as a CSS selector. Okay, so driver dot find element by dot CSS selector. This is a CSS selector. By looking at this, we can say this is a CSS selector because we are not using any double slash. Okay, this is not an XPath. Dot send keys going to pass some Selenium, something I want to change it. That's it. Okay. If we run this, okay, I'm able to enter Selenium. So that is the XPS selector. Now let us change this selector. Like instead of CSS selector, I'm going to write XPath here. Okay, what will happen? What should happen? We should get a exception. Let us see what exception we'll get. Because you are providing a CSS selector here and you're trying to put a locator name XPath. Okay, so what will happen? That's a contradiction, right? Not same. This is a CSS selector and they are providing XPath. So let us run this and see what will happen. At that particular line, we should get an exception. Open the browser, launch the URL, maximize the window, everything we've done. And whenever trying to find that element, we cannot find it because we are using by.xpath and inside we are passing CSS value. Okay, not XPath. So all these kind of things you have to try it. Okay, what will happen? What exactly will happen? All the negative scenarios you have to try. It's still loading. Well, let us wait the page to load. The performance is bad. We can't do anything. Okay, nothing happened. Why nothing happened? There will be some exception occurred. Let me close this first. So where we got the exception? Don't go up from the bottom only. At the last line only, you can see where we got the exception. In this class, CSS underscore selectors example. In this class, this is a class, right? In this class, in this file, .java file, CSS underscore selectors underscore example .java file, at the 19th line. At the 19th line, we got an exception. So this is the 19th line. Here we got an exception. Okay, what exception we got? Just go up now. What exception we got? No such element exception. It is saying there is no element with the help of this particular selector because the wrong selector that you have given and you are using XPath here, there is no element with this particular selector. It is telling that no such element exception. Obviously, it cannot find. Here, if you provide CSS selector, then only the corresponding value it can identify. If you're providing XPath and writing some wrong selector, you're getting a no such element exception. It is saying there is no such element. This is the exception that we got. Okay, so make sure you provide properly whenever using CSS selectors or XPath, right? You make sure you provide the correct one here. That's it. This is about tag name and any other attribute apart from ID or name and ID or class name. Okay, tag and class is the syntax. Tag name dot class value input dot set query. And if you use tag and ID, tag name and hash ID value, right? Input hash the corresponding ID. If you are using any other attribute, input square brackets open and close attribute name is equal to single quotes attribute value. Don't put @ don't put double slash. So that's it. This is how we have written. This is a CSS selector, and this is a XPath. Okay, this is an example that we have written here. Okay, clear? Now,
Clear, sir.
Okay. So now what we are going to do is, so in XPath we have used the starts with, right? Contains, starts with we have used, right? Here also we have those features. We can identify any attribute where it starts with some value, where it contains some value, or else here also we can perform where it ends with some other value. Okay, we don't need to complete value, where we can give a partial value, whether it is a starting value or middle value or any other value, or else a last value, which value you want to identify. Okay, so now I want to identify an element with attribute name, but I don't want to give complete name because I feel the starting value is unique. I have complete name will be there, long name will be there, but I don't want a complete name. Only partial value I want to give. That is starting value is unique. So I have to use starts with in XPath. But here there is a symbol where it represents starts with. Okay, what is that symbol? The name is equal to, don't put name is equal to means exact value you need to provide when you put is equal to. Now I want to use starts with value only. Starting value only I want to check. So now input name starts with, you have to put starts with symbol. So what is the symbol? Cap symbol is the starts with. Okay. Starts with cap symbol. Where you find this symbol? You'll find this symbol at the number 6 in your laptop. Okay. There you'll have the symbol. Just put shift and then 6. You'll get this symbol. Then is equal to. Okay. Here we're telling it identify an element with input tag where name starts with. Okay. So what is the starting value here? Okay. I can provide the name starts with. Search. I can give. So no need to go complete. I want to put starting value, just provide. That's it. I didn't provide complete name also. Okay, search underscore query I didn't provide. Only search I have provided because this is the starting value. Where I want to identify elements with the starting value search. Okay. Clear? Any confusion? Confusion?
No, sir.
Clear? Everyone clear, right?
Yes.
Okay, yes. So if you provide any, sorry, if you provide underscore query, let's say underscore query, you cannot identify because this is not the starting value. So when you're using cap symbol, this is nothing but the name should start with corresponding value. Identify an element where name starts with corresponding value. If you provide query like this, cannot identify because this is not the starting value. You have to provide only starting value only. This is about the starts with in CSS selector. We haven't done anything. Before the double equal to, we have put this symbol, that's it. Equal to represent the exact value that you need to provide. The cap symbol represents the starting value. Only partial value you can provide, not the complete value. That's about the starting. Tag name, attribute name starts with prefix attribute value. Prefix is nothing but starting attribute value. Prefix is nothing but starting attribute value. And now I want to identify an element with any of the text in between. Let's say in between the text there are long values there. In the middle or somewhere you find that it is unique, where you can identify the element uniquely. Okay, only one element you can identify that particular text. In between somewhere it is there. Then you cannot use starts with. Then you have to use contains. In XPath you're using contains, right? But here we need to use another symbol. We have to symbols only here. Instead of cap symbol, we have to use what symbol? Star. Star represents contains. Okay. Star represent contains. How to read? I want to identify an input element where name contains such. Where name contains some value. That value we need to provide. So no need to provide the starting value only. Let's say I want to provide ch underscore qu. Any value I can provide, not only starting or ending. So I want to provide, but the character should be in sequence. Okay. You cannot put SC and then last RY. You cannot provide like that. You should provide a sequence of characters. It should be anywhere in that particular value. Now I want to provide ch underscore qu. How it identified? Because this text is present in the name somewhere. Okay. ch underscore qu. Okay. Here we can see that. Anywhere within the value we can identify when you use star symbol. Star represents the contains. Anywhere within the value we can provide any partial text. input where name contains this particular value. You have to provide star equal to. Clear, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Now, I want to. There is a very kind of I have start with. I have used starts with, and also I have used contains. Now I want to identify an element with ends with. In XPath, we don't have anything with ends with, right? Now in CSS Selector we have. So what symbol we have to use where you want to identify any element with the attribute ending partial value, ending value. So here we need to use the dollar symbol. Dollar symbol. When you use dollar symbol, then you have to provide the last value. Anything which is nothing but from the last, you have to provide some value. That's it. Now here I'm going to provide query. That is the last value. Okay. Now I'm able to identify the query or underscore query or else ERY. Anything you provide, but the last value should provide. Okay. So input where name ends with query. Dollar symbol is nothing but ends with. I want to identify an element with input tag where name ends with query. Okay. That's how we need to read. This is one way that we can write a CSS selector. Clear, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that's what I have written here. So yeah. So starts with using a cap symbol we need to use. Tag name, attribute name starts with prefix attribute value. This is the example. Input name starts with sets and ends with the dollar symbol. Tag name ends with underscore query, something like that. The last value you need to provide and contains any value in between the anything you can provide. Where input tag ID contains underscore query underscore something I have given, ID I have given. Any attribute you can use. That's fine. Okay, now in XPath, when you're writing relative XPath, you have started with a double slash. But if you want to navigate from parent to child, what we have used? Single slash. Parent to child navigation that is happened using single slash when you're using XPath. Right? It could be relative XPath or absolute XPath, doesn't matter. From parent to net, how we can navigate? Using single slash. Okay. Here, what we need to use if we want to navigate from parent to child, we will see that. Okay. Just a second. I'm going to open another example. I want to show you clearly. Okay. I want to open this Swag Labs. Okay, fine. So now, if you see here, this is another website that I have opened to show you the example how to navigate from parent to child. So let's say this is a form element, right? Where ID is equal to FRM login, and then inside this we have a two child elements. This is one is the username. Inside we have the input element, that is fine, but at least we'll navigate to this particular div element, parent to child. So this is a div element, and then this is another div element. These two are the childs of this particular form. So parent to child, I want to navigate. So if I want to identify this, I want to write a CSS selector where I can navigate from parent to child. So first I need to identify parent, then I need to navigate to child. In XPath, we are writing like this. Using single slash, using double slash, I'm going to identify this element parent, and using single slash, I'm navigating to child. Now, if I want to identify this particular element using CSS selector, because we are writing complete CSS selector only. So how to identify this element using CSS selector? Till now, we have seen different examples how to write a CSS selector for any element. So how to identify this element using CSS selector? Hash FRM login, correct? Right, let me write that first. It will be very quick, okay? FRM login. Okay, that's fine. Okay, this is FRM login. So this is nothing but the ID. So now if I want to navigate to the child element, which is nothing but the where ID is div username, right? I want to navigate to username here. Okay, how to navigate to child? So here we no need to put single slash. We have to put arrow symbol. We have left arrow, right arrow, greater than or the symbols are there, right? We have to use those symbols. We have to use this symbol. Okay, front arrow. Okay, this is nothing but the navigating to the immediate child element. From the parent to child, this is how you need to navigate. And then you have to write a CSS selector to identify this particular username again. Okay, we are navigating again. So how to write, how to identify? There are multiple div elements are there. If I put div here, 5 div elements are there. Okay, if you identify uniquely, again I have to write a CSS selector for that particular element. Or XPath, when you're writing XPath, we are writing XPath for that particular element, child element. Now we have to write a CSS selector for the child element, which element you want to identify. So if you want to identify username, I want to write XPath for this. How to write, not CSS selector for this. How to write CSS selector for again this hash, not at the rate, hash symbol, and then div username. That's it. This symbol you need to identify. Instead of single slash, in XPath we are writing using single slash. Now we have to use this symbol. And you have to write a CSS selector for parent element, and then this symbol to navigate to child, and which child element you want to identify. You have to write one more CSS selector. Okay, the syntax will change, the concept will be same. Okay, parent to child. Okay, so this is how we need to identify the element. Again, inside this, if you want to identify this input element, inside this div username element, again you have to use cap symbol, and again you use hash text username, or else there is only one input element, I can use directly tag name also. If there are multiple div elements, I'm directly identifying using name or ID, whatever the CSS selector that I can write, or else tag name along with the class name, tag name, ag name, and any other attributes you can use. However you want to write, you can write it. But now I don't want to use ID because there is only one input element. After cap symbol, I'm directly using input. That's it. Using tag name only. That is also fine. Clear? Any questions? Or else you can use ID also. Hash again ID. That's also fine. Or dot class name. That is also fine. Or else tag name dot class name. Whatever the CSS selectors we have seen as of now, you can use any CSS selector. But the navigation you have to understand. Immediate child element from parent to child, we have to navigate using the front arrow, kind of, or else greater than symbol. Clear, everyone? Okay. So now, how to identify descendants? Not immediate child, it's a kind of descendants. How we are identifying descendants in XPath? Again, we are putting double slash. Anywhere within the element, we are trying to identify another element. It's not immediate child, it's a kind of grandchild or any other descendants we are trying to identify. I want to navigate, I don't want to navigate one by one. First, I'm identifying one element. From there, I want to identify within the element, any element I want to identify, not only the direct child. So this input is not a direct child. Div is a direct child for form, but input is not a direct child. Right? This is a descendant. So how to identify descendants in XPath? Using double slash. Okay. But now how to identify? First, we need to identify the form element. Inside, I don't want to navigate to div element. Inside the div, I have this input element with ID text username. I directly want to identify this. Now, what I have to write? What I need to write? Don't put any symbol. Just give one space, and then directly write the identify the corresponding. And so, if you give one line, one space, if you give, the meaning is nothing but the descendants. The front arrow symbol is nothing but immediate child. If you give space, anywhere within the selector, we can identify any element. The descendants we can identify. Just the parent and then space and then can descendant selector. Hope everyone clear. Any questions here? I'll stop it for 1 minute. Any questions?
No, sir.
Okay, just compare. Okay, XPath, how we are writing XPath and how we are writing CSS selectors. Okay, that's what I've given here. If you want to identify direct child, you have to use front arrow symbol or as greater than symbol. So parent selector and then child selector. And then in between you have to put this symbol, not space. Direct child you have to use cap symbol, not cap, the front arrow symbol. So this is how you need to identify. So what is this meaning here? This example meaning. By looking at the example, you can see what essentially this is. This is class. And inside the class, I'm trying to identify. Huh?
Child.
What is this? Child is fine. What is this?
Child. Child.
This is a link. Okay, A is nothing but the tag name, right? This is a link.
Anchor tag.
Anchor tag, link. We're trying to identify link. So by looking at this, we can say this is a class name. This is one selector. Inside this, we have one more child with the class name cart underscore block. Okay, by looking at the CS selector, we have to know what exactly that we are using here. That's it. And also the descendants. So parent locator and then single space and then descendant locator. This is how we need to write. We have to use div is a tag name and then dot class value space. Inside this, I'm going to identify descendant called. Span is a tag name dot and then we have a one more CSS value. Okay. I think they have used some other example. So some other website example. But looking at this, we can say tag name dot class value space. I'm trying to identify descendant element span tag name dot the corresponding class value. Okay. So this is one CSS selector for the descendant, and this is one CSS selector for parent. Okay. Now, okay, I'm going to go back to the previous example. Okay, previously we have used index concept, right, to identify the child elements. If you have more than one child element, we are identifying using index, right? Here we have to use differently. Okay, I'm going to use the same example previously in XPath what I've shown. So under the information, okay, under the information, we have different UL elements, right? So this is ID where we have different LI elements. Each LI element represents the corresponding value. So first LI element specials, second one is new products, third best sellers, fourth our stories. There are different LI elements are there. Each represents a one item here in the application. So out of all LI elements, I want to identify fourth element or fifth element, sixth element. Based on index, we are doing it. Now I want to identify. So how to identify? So Control F. So first I need to identify this section using ID. Now I have to use hash symbol and ID. So inside ID, inside section, we have two child elements, H4 and UL. So I want to identify UL. So direct child. How to put hash symbol and then UL. That's it. Because only one UL element is there. So inside UL, I want to identify the best sellers, which is nothing but the third element. Third LI element. Now again, I need to use immediate child. How to use? Single arrow and LI. If I put LI like this, 8 elements are getting identified. Count. Now I want to identify third element. Now, so we have to put out of all the LI elements, I want to identify the third element. What exactly I need to write? Use colon. Okay. Use colon and then nth hyphen of hyphen type in the normal brackets. Use the corresponding value. Nth of type 3. Okay. Nth of type 3. This is the syntax that you need to use. Li colon. Out of all the Li elements, I want to identify the third element. Nth of type 3. If you want to identify fourth element, just change it to 4. Our stores is highlighted. Second element, new products you want to highlight. Select 2. Okay. Let's say I want to identify best sellers. I need to put 3. So inside the Li element, there is an anchor tag. There is a link, not tag. We have to cite a link. There is a link is there. So if I want to select this link, click on this link. What I need to do? I just need to put single again child and then tag name A you give. That's it. In the third Li element, I'm trying to identify the link. Okay. Let us try to click on this link. We will see what exactly happens. Okay. Which is nothing but I'm trying to click on best sellers link. Okay. Let us copy this and I'll try to click on that link. Driver dot find element by dot CSS selector. Inside the double quotes, copy the complete selector. Now I want to click on it. Just dot click. Normally we click. So we will navigate to different page. Under the href, whatever the link that is there in href, we'll navigate to the corresponding page. So what will happen when we click on bestsellers? Let us click manually and see. We'll be navigating to this particular page. Okay. Okay. These are the bestsellers. Okay. Now let us try to click with this particular code. Let us run this. Okay. We navigated to bestsellers. We're able to click on that link. Okay, by using the CSS selector. So that's about CSS selector. Let's come back. So now let us identify the same thing. Okay, let me copy the Control F and then paste it. So this is how we have identified, right? Let us remove this. So I'm going to try to identify the third Li element, correct? Out of all the Li elements, I have identified the third Li element. Now I want to identify the last Li element. How many elements that are present, I'm not aware. It could be 20, 30, anything. But I want to identify the last element. There, what we did, we used the last child, not last child. We have used the last option in XPath. Last -1. We have used that. So now here I want to identify the last element out of all the elements. So now what I need to do is, here we need to write Li colon, right? And then you have to put last hyphen child. That's it. It will identify the last element out of all the elements. So using li, out of all the li elements, I want to identify the last element. Just put colon and then last hyphen child. This is the one where we can identify the last element. Clear? Any questions as of now? These are about the CSS selectors. Okay. Now, what is the disadvantages that we have with respect to CSS selector when compared to XPath? There is a disadvantages and advantages also. First, let us see the disadvantage. What is the disadvantages that we have with respect to CSS selector when I compare to XPath? So what are the different things that we did as part of XPath? Parent to child we navigated, nth child element position based on position, starts with that we have everything we did. Now, what is the disadvantages that we have with respect to CSS selector when compared to XPath? XPath has some advantage. We are navigating from child to parent also. Did we navigate from child to parent? Yes, we did, right? Child to parent also we are going to navigate using the parent or as double dot if kept yesterday. Now, here in CSS selector, we cannot navigate from child to parent. Okay, child to parent navigation is not possible in CSS selector, as far as I know. Okay. Okay. So that is not possible. That is one disadvantages. But what is the advantages that we have with respect to XPath? When compared to XPath, what is the advantages that we have in CSS selectors? So what XPath will do is, we are using XPath in this Chrome browser, right? And XPath we can write in Firefox browser. So if you write XPath in Chrome browser and if you try to work with the same XPath in different browsers, sometimes it might not work, the XPath that you're writing, because XPath engine will be different for each and every browser. What a XPath engine will do? It will interpret. It will convert the XPath and try to understand. Okay, that will be engine will be different. XPath engine will be different, where the same XPath cannot work in all the browsers same. Mostly it will work in the current browsers it is supporting, but in some cases it might not work. XPath that you're writing in Chrome, the same XPath, if you have written a long XPath, double slash and then ID and then child you're navigating and then parent you're coming and something you're doing. The same XPath, it might not work in all the browsers. But CSS selector, it will work same. Because for CSS selectors, so by default, when they're developing front-end technology, they are using CSS only. They're developing cascading style sheets, we call it as. Based on the technology only, we're trying to identify these elements. No need to go deeply. So XPath might not work for all the browsers because XPath engine will be different for each and every browser. But CSS selector will work for same in all the browsers. Okay. That is the difference. You can ask the last question. Which one you prefer when you compare to XPath and CSS selector? You have to say CSS selector. Why you will prefer? Because CSS selector works same in all the browsers, but XPath it might not work because XPath engine, where it try to understand the browser, which is try to understand the XPath that we are writing is different for each and every browser because XPath engine is different. It might not work. We cannot say 100%, but some cases, very rare cases, it might not work. Okay, that's about the locators. We are done with the locators. Now we are able to identify the elements using different types of locators. Okay, now once we identify the elements, we are performing different actions on the elements, right? That's what we need to do. What Selenium will do, it interprets the user actions. Whatever the user is performing some actions on the application, to test our application, we have to navigate to different pages. We have to click on different elements. We have to do a lot of stuff in the application. The same thing we are trying to do with Selenium. Okay, that's about the locators. Once we identify the elements, we can perform different actions on the elements. Okay, clear everyone? Any other questions with respect to locators? I'll jump into another concept if you're able to understand. Okay, fine. Okay, till now what we did, we are trying to identify the element uniquely, right? We are trying to identify only one element here out of, so writing an XPath or CSS selector or any locator that we are using, we are identifying only one element and we are trying to perform action. driver.FindElement. Inside that we are using any of the locator, correct? And we are performing the action. Let's say we are writing an XPath or CSS selector where it is giving more than one element. What will happen? Okay, we will see that. Now let's say I'm going to identify this search box. Not this search box. I'm going to write an XPath where it is giving two search boxes. Let's say. So X input @type is equal to how many it is giving. So let me put it like this. So this two elements it is giving. If you see the right side count, it is giving the two elements. Right? This XPath, whatever it is I have written here, it is giving me two elements. Normally, you have to identify uniquely, but let's say it is identifying two elements. Okay. So first is this particular element, and then when you click on enter here, you're navigating to second element. Two elements with this XPath we are able to get. Okay. This is second element, and this is the first element. So 1 of 2, and then 2 of 2. Out of 2 elements, this is the second element. Out of 2, this is the first element. Okay. Now, if you use this XPath to find an element, what exactly happens? Because this XPath is giving me two elements. This XPath expression is giving me two elements. Now let us do that. What will happen? Okay. Let me create a package. Any idea what will happen? No idea. Okay. Normally we'll having two methods. Okay. Find element we have. You see, normally till now we are using the find element, right? There is one more method we have, find elements, plural. We will see the difference first. So to see the difference, what will happen first with this and what will happen with the next one? We will see one by one. For that, I'm creating a package. Find element. Find elements. Okay. Inside this, I'm going to create a class called find element, something like this. Example. Okay. In this, I'm going to reuse the existing code that we have to open the application. Opening the browser. Okay. Maximizing the window and then opening the URL. So now I'm using driver dot find element by dot XPath. I'm going to use this XPath, which is giving me this XPath expression is returning me two elements. Dot send keys. Okay, what I need to do, send keys. I want to enter some Selenium, whatever it is. Okay. So this XPath expression, whatever that I have given, is giving me two elements. Okay. So, but we can perform only one action with the find element method. Find element method performs only on one element only. Okay. So on which element it will perform? Out of two elements, on which element it will perform the action? If you see this is a singular find element, only one element we can identify using find element method. Even the XPath expression is giving more than one web element, we can perform action on only one element. Find element method perform action on only one element. Only one element. So in which method, which username it will enter. So where it will enter the corresponding Selenium. There are two text boxes. Let us see what will happen. Entering here, right? It is not entering here. There are two text boxes are there. It is entering only on the first text box. Okay. So why it is entering on the first text box? We will see. So there are with this there are two elements are there. This is 1 of 2. 1 of 2 is nothing but this particular text box, and this is 2 of 2. This is a second text box. So when we are using find element method, and you are providing an XPath, whether it is returning one element or more than one element. One element, if it is giving us XPath, that is fine. It performs action on that particular element only. If the XPath is giving more than one element, and if you are using FindElement method, the FindElement method behavior is to work on only one element. So which element it will take? The first element it will take from the top to bottom in the HTML code. Whatever the first element it finds, it performs the action on the first element only. It ignores the remaining elements. You can give XPath expression, it is giving 10 elements. That is fine. But the FindElement performs the action on only one element, which is happening on the first when it comes to top to bottom. And also you can see like this also. Here, if you see 1 of 2, right? On the first element only it performs the action, not on the 2 of 2, second element. Out of 2 elements, it performs the action on the first element it finds from the top to bottom in the document. That is a FindElement behavior. FindElement uniquely identifies the element on the web page. Only one element it can identify, even though you are providing an XPath expression which is giving more than one web element. Okay, from the top to bottom approach. Clear about FindElement? If you want to identify more than one web element, in that case, you have to use the another method called FindElements, plural. Okay, let's see that example. Okay, so what is FindElement? This method uniquely identifies a web element on a page. Uniquely identifies on the web element on the page. If there are multiple elements present on the web page, if the XPath expression or CSS selector or name, class name, whatever you give, if that is giving more than one web element also, FindElement identifies only one element, which is coming first from the top to bottom. FindElement method returns the firstmost element on the web page. Okay, it returns the firstmost element on the web page. So we will see that. So normally I'm sending text here like this using send case. I no need to send like this because once I identify the element, this FindElement method returns the web element where I can store it in web element. So this is the statement to find the web element. I'm not performing any action here. I'm finding the element. So this complete FindElement method gives the web element. So if you put your mouse on the web FindElement, it is giving us the web element where I can store in a web element. I can store it in web element. Some name I can give. I need to import this web element from org.openqa.selenium. Okay. Once I import this, I use this reference variable to perform any action. Okay. Works same. Here. So previously, once I find the element like this, driver.FindElement, here only I'm writing .send keys, right? So once what FindElement will do, the complete statement will give us a web element. Here directly I'm performing .send keys previously. No need to do that. I can store it in a web element because this complete statement is giving us a web element and use this reference variable to perform any action. In this way also we can write. So what FindElement method it will give? It will give a web element. That is an important question. What is the return type of FindElement method? Return type of FindElement method is a web element. So we have seen return types, void or any other thing. Normally strings we have seen, string, integer, different types of return types we have seen. It can return web elements also. Primitive data types it can return and non-primitive data types also it can return. So here web element is a non-primitive data type. Any classes that you create, any interfaces, okay, strings, arrays, all these things are a non-primitive data types. A method can return a primitive data type, a method can return a non-primitive data type also. Here this FindElement they have designed in such a way that FindElement method will return a web element, which is nothing but the firstmost web element out of all the web elements. You can give any XPath expression, any CSS selector, any locator that you can give. Out of all the elements, it identifies the first element that we can store it in a web element. Clear? Any confusion? Clear? Okay. So this is an important question. What is the difference between FindElement and FindElements, and what are the return types for both the methods? Okay. Okay, we're able to perform the action also. See? Okay, let me close this. This is about FindElement. You can give any locator, class name, tag name, If it is providing, it is giving more than one web element, it identifies the firstmost web element only, and we can store it in a web element. Okay. Now, the XPath expression that we are giving is, or any locator that we are trying to identify is, that element itself is not there. Okay. Let me give the name, wrong name here. Something. Let's say this XPath, this locator itself is not there. Sometimes the locator might change, right? That time we cannot find the element. Currently, I'm giving wrong here. That is fine to see that how what exactly happens. So normally, if there is no element found, when you're using FindElement method, FindElement, what it will do, it finds the element based on the locator that we're given. So if the element is not found by the FindElement method, so what will happen? We'll see. When they ask about difference, we have to tell all these different things. Okay, whatever I'm showing it now. Okay, it's not able to find the elements. It's not performing any action because the XPath that you're given is wrong, or itself the XPath is still not present. The element itself, the locator itself is not present. It is not able to find the element using the corresponding XPath. Okay, in that case, whenever FindElement is not able to find the element, it throws a no such element exception. This thing you have to remember. Whenever the element is not found, when you are trying to find an element using FindElement, if the element was not found, we get a no such element exception. Okay, this is one more point. So that is the concept with respect to FindElement. If you see here, this method uniquely identifies the element on the web page. Only one element it identifies. If there are multiple elements present on the web page, when you're providing a locator, it could be any locator, it is giving more than one web element. FindElement finds the only one element, which is the topmost element, first element. And we can store that in a web element because FindElement return type is web element. If there are no elements identified, then FindElement will throw a no such element exception. Okay, so this is the syntax. Driver.FindElement will give us a web element where we can perform any action on that particular web element using the reference. Now there is another method, FindElements. If you want to know number of elements, if you want to identify more than one web element, in that case you cannot use FindElement because FindElement identifies only one element. If you want to identify more than one web element, then you have to use FindElements, plural. Okay. So if the method, okay, FindElements, when you have to use, if you want to identify more than one web element, in that case you have to use the FindElements method. Okay, so more than one elements, forget about here. So more than one data where we can store normally in Java, one element you are storing in normal variable. One data we are storing normal variable. If there are more than one element, more than one data, so where we are storing? Huh? Where we are storing arrays? Huh? See, there is one data. Normally we are storing it in normal variable. If there is multiple data that we want to store, where you are storing? Using arrays, using list, set, different things we are using. If you want to store more than one data, correct? You should not forget. Okay. So multiple data, we can store it in arrays or we can store it in list, set. There are multiple things are available. But what FindElements will give? FindElements is giving more than one web element, correct? FindElement is giving one web element where we're storing in web element. Now FindElements is giving more than one web element, correct? So if you want to store more than one integer, you are using list of integer. More than one strings, if you want to store, you are using list of string. Correctly, FindElements will give us a list of web element. List of the return type of FindElements is list of web elements because FindElements identify all the elements where we can store. We cannot store in web element because that's not a one element. More than one web element it is identifying where we can store it in a list. That list accepts the data type web element, not an integer, not a string. That is of data type web element. Clear? Any questions? Clarity needed. Huh? You have to practice Java. Then only you have to understand. Okay. If you don't practice Java, then you cannot understand. Similarly, like integer, similarly like string. So web element is a non-primitive data type, which is a interface. Web element is interface. Arrays, classes, interface, all these are non-primitive data types. Okay, we can store number of web elements in a list also. FindElements return type is list of web elements, where we can store n number of web elements inside a list. So this method returns the list of web elements based on the matching criteria, based on the locator that you are giving, whether your class name, tag name, anything you can give. It gives the number of web elements, more than one element that we can store it in a list of web elements. We will see that. So the same example, at the rate type is equal to text. How many elements are got identified? 2. So now let us try to see, use FindElements method now. Okay. FindElements example. Okay, now driver dot FindElements. Use FindElements here, not FindElement. So by dot, I'm using XPath. Any locator you can use out of 8 locators. If it is giving more than one web element, if you want to identify, I'm using this only. Input type is equal to text, where it is giving me 2 web elements. I want to know how many input elements are present with the type text. Okay. Now this is a statement where it identifies more than one web element. What is the return type of web element? FindElements. List of web elements. Okay, it's a list. It's not a one web element. It's a list of web elements, more than one web element. So list of web element. I can store all input elements, something like this. Here we need to import 2 things. One, list we need to import, and web element we need to import. Web element we need to import from org.openqa.selenium. Okay. List we need to import from, this is a java.util. Web element is from Selenium, list is from java.util. Okay. So these are the all input elements. So what is the size of the list now? What is the size of the list? If it is a list of string, if you are storing 3 elements, 3 string elements, what is the size of list? 3. If you are storing, how many web elements you are storing? 2 web elements are storing. Why you are not answering? 2 web elements you are storing inside a list. What is the size of the list? 2. Okay, how to know the size of the list? What is the method? Dot length, that is for arrays. What for list? Dot size. Dot size. Okay, dot size gives the list size. Here we are storing 2 web elements. The list of size, the list will be, size will be 2. Let me print this. Let me run this. And FindElements will fetch all the web elements based on the matching criteria. Here the XPath is giving 2 elements. Using FindElements, we can get all the web elements, not only single web element. All the web elements are stored in list of web elements. The 2 elements will be stored in list of web elements. The size will be 2 because we're able to store all the elements. Okay. We'll see different examples of FindElements in the later sessions also. And if you're the XPath, it's the locator that you're providing is not correct, or the locator that you're providing is not there in the application, in the code. So previously what happened when you're using FindElement, it is giving a no such element exception. Here what happens? Here we won't get any exception. Okay. FindElements method will not throw any exception whenever there is an XPath expression or any locator is wrong. It will give, instead of, it will give a list where you don't have any web elements. List of 0 elements. Nothing we can store. We won't get any exception. Let me run this. Okay, let me run this. Let's see. It's like an empty list. We are not storing anything in the list. That's it. It will not throw any exception. So find element will throw a no such element exception. Find elements will not throw any exception. Instead, the list will be empty list. The size will be 0. That's it. No elements are stored. It's still running. We'll see. Okay, it's executed. So we will see 0. Okay, that's about difference between find element and find elements. You have to tell all these differences. Find element method uniquely identifies a web element. Okay, so even though you're giving more than, even though you're giving a locator which identifies more than one web element, the find element takes the only one web element from the top to bottom where it identifies, and we can store it in a web element. The return type is web element. If the element is not found, it will get a no such element exception. So what about find elements? If you want to identify more than one web element, the XPath expression or any locator, if you are providing class name or tag name, anything. Normally, if you use tag name also, you'll give more than one web element. Where we can store it in a list, where list contains a web element. That is the reason list of web elements. Okay, list contains strings, integers. No, list contains a web elements because we are getting a number of web elements. So we can know the size of a web elements. And if there is no element found using find elements method, we will not get any exception. Instead of, the list will be 0, empty list. That is a difference. Any questions? And you can try it using tag name also. I have given an example here. You can use tag name like button, how many buttons are present, how many input elements are present. Okay, you can check how many links are present. We can give tag name as A. How many links are present inside a page, we can know. Okay, just print the size as of now. Hope everyone clear. Any questions?
Sir, is there any chance like element is present but not visible on the website?
Yeah, sometimes it might be present. It might happen that. So we will see that later. Okay. So the hidden elements cannot see. There are multiple input elements will be present, but all those are not visible on the page because those are hidden. There will be hidden property will be there. Okay, that we will see later, slowly, one by one, later point of time. Okay. Yeah. So hope everyone understood about find element and find elements difference. You want to identify element uniquely, use find element. You want to identify more than one web element, mostly try to use find elements. Right. Okay, that's fine. If you have any questions, you can ask me. Otherwise, we can end up the session for today.
Sir, good afternoon, sir. I am Partha Saradi.
Hey, Partha. Good afternoon.
Sir, I have been not attending for last few classes. I know I'm not coming any updates, sir.
Your already videos are there, right? Partha, you are from the last batch only, right?
Sir,
So we have just started.
I listened to that only 38 minutes video. You have been taken on 23 Wednesday.
No, the same classes we are repeating again.
Same classes you are repeating. Only 11 videos, sir. Selenium.
Partha, the Selenium we have started again. Okay, we have included in a new batch where we started Selenium recently only from the past 3 days. Okay,
Oh,
you can start from fresh. It's a kind of fresh. Okay, to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sir, where the old batch students are attending, sir? They are attending again.
Yes, they are attending again. We have completed only 6 or 7 class, something like that, right? So the same we are repeating again here. So you can listen here. Yeah.
We completed 11 classes, sir, totally.
Up to
web element. Selenium up to web elements we have been completed.
That is fine. We are repeating it again from the beginning.
Right now, which topic you are discussing, sir?
Find element and find elements difference. Locators we have completed, and we are talking about find element and find elements.
Okay.
Yes.
Now here you discussing 7 to 8 classes. So yesterday afternoon I gave an interview for Amazon, sir.